welcome back to Echoes of Earth. Tonight, we journey to one of the most extraordinary and turbulent chapters in the planet's long history, a time known to scientists as the Great Dying or the End Permian Extinction. This event, occurring about 252 million years ago, represents the most profound mass extinction in Earth's history. Nearly all life, as it had existed, vanished from the planet's surface. Yet, in the quiet persistence of the smallest organisms, the seeds of life's renewal were already being sown. Before we fully immerse ourselves in that vanished world, let us take a moment to notice where we are right now. Perhaps it is night, and the world outside your window is soft and still, while you are wrapped in a blanket, letting your mind wander. Perhaps it is the early morning, your senses still fresh, your first cup of tea steaming beside you. Or perhaps it is the middle of the day, and you have carved out these moments as a respite from motion and noise. Wherever you are, this moment is a portal, and as we cross it, we step back hundreds of millions of years into landscapes that are alien to our imagination, yet foundational to the world we inhabit today. To begin, imagine the supercontinent Pangaea. It is a vast, singular landmass, stretching from pole to pole, as though the entire world were pressed together like pieces of a puzzle. The interior is harsh and dry, a desert that stretches farther than the eye can see. Storms sweep across barren plains. Rivers, when they appear, carry precious water like silver ribbons across the dusty land. Along the coasts, shallow seas lap at the edges of Pangaea, teeming with life, while further out, the oceans deepen into mysterious abyssal plains. It is on this stage that the drama of the Great Dying begins to unfold. Beneath the surface, the Earth itself is restless. In what we now call Siberia, enormous volcanic eruptions have begun. Vast flows of basalt, some hundreds of meters thick, pour from fissures in the crust, covering forests, rivers, and wetlands. These eruptions are not mere local events. They release immense volumes of gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide, into the atmosphere. Temperatures begin to rise. The oceans warm. Acid rain falls, altering the chemistry of both land and water. Life, which had flourished for hundreds of millions of years, now faces pressures unlike any it has experienced before. In the oceans, changes are equally dramatic. Warming waters lead to oxygen depletion, a condition scientists call anoxia. Fish, mollusks, and other marine creatures struggle to survive in waters that were once plentiful and balanced. Microbes adapt and bloom in the absence of their predators, creating strange, almost alien ecosystems. Coral reefs, which had been vibrant and complex, collapse under the weight of chemical imbalance and temperature stress. In these seas, the old order is disappearing, giving way to a world on the brink. And yet, even in this immense turmoil, life persists. Small, resilient species cling to survival. Microbes thrive in isolated pockets. Primitive plants grow where soils remain fertile enough to sustain them. Insects, amphibians, and early reptiles navigate a landscape of extremes, finding refuge where they can. It is in these hidden sanctuaries that the story of recovery will quietly begin. Consider the scale of this extinction. Over 90% of marine species and roughly 70% of terrestrial species vanish. Trilobites, once abundant, disappear entirely. Vast forests of primitive plants are reduced to skeletal remains. The skies, once alive with the movement of insects and small flying creatures, become quieter. The earth, for the first time in millions of years, feels emptier, as though a great exhale has swept through life itself. Yet, the causes of this event are layered and interconnected. Volcanism is central, but it is not the sole factor. Methane released from permafrost and the sea floor amplifies warming. Acid rain reshapes soils and waters. Rising temperatures disrupt ocean currents and the delicate balance of marine chemistry. Oxygen depletion makes survival difficult for even the simplest forms of life. This cascade of events demonstrates the fragility of ecosystems, even on a scale so massive that it encompasses the entire planet. Visualize, for a moment, the world through the eyes of a tiny insect or amphibian surviving at this time. The air is thick and warm. Dust and ash from distant eruptions hang in the sky. Storms may come with little warning, flooding dry riverbeds and reshaping the land in hours. On the ground, forests are sparse and twisted. Volcanoes smoke and rumble in the distance. Streams carry minerals and toxins alike. Even in these harsh conditions, life finds niches. Small amphibians burrow in the mud. Microbes colonize shallow pools. Tiny ferns push through cracks in blackened soil. The world is harsh, yet it is alive. The great dying also reshape the oceans in ways that are both fascinating and terrifying. With warming and anoxia, many species could no longer survive. Oxygen-starved waters became chemical deserts. Some microorganisms produced hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas, which further poisoned the waters and even reached the atmosphere, affecting the land. The oceans themselves became a crucible, testing the resilience of life, revealing which species could endure extreme stress and which would vanish forever. On land, similar dramas unfolded. Forests struggled to survive. Gymnosperms, primitive seed-bearing plants, attempted to recolonize soils scorched by heat and acid rain. Insects, small yet crucial, navigated landscapes transformed by drought, volcanic debris, and rising temperatures. Early reptiles, some ancestors of later dinosaurs, roamed these perilous terrains, adapting to survive in conditions far more extreme than anything modern ecosystems face. Imagine the skies above Pangaea during this time. They are filled with haze from volcanic eruptions. Sunlight is diffused, casting eerie shadows across deserts and scorched forests. Nights may glow faintly from distant lava flows. Lightning storms strike more frequently, driven by unstable atmospheric conditions. The winds carry dust and ash, reshaping the land, filling valleys and covering plains with layers of volcanic sediment. Even the air itself carries a weight, thick with particles and chemicals, a reminder of the planet's unrest. And yet, amid this chaos, there is resilience. Small pockets of life endure, tucked away in refuges, shielded from the worst extremes. Microbes colonize isolated pools. Certain plants adapt to acidic soils. Insects exploit niches left by the disappearance of larger competitors. Life, in its quiet persistence, begins laying the foundations for the eventual recovery of ecosystems. The recovery after the Great Dying was not immediate. It took millions of years for biodiversity to return to previous levels. New forms of life appeared gradually. Marine species slowly recolonized the oceans. Sharks and early fish diversified. On land, gymnosperms spread across the continents. Insects found new niches. Reptiles evolved novel forms. From the edge of catastrophe, the seeds of renewal grew, slowly reshaping the world and paving the way for the Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs. Even as we reflect on the devastation, we see the lessons inherent in this ancient story. Life is resilient, but it is also vulnerable. Ecosystems are interconnected, and a shift in one part of the system can reverberate across the entire planet. The Great Dying reminds us of the delicate balance that sustains life, the forces that can disrupt it, and the enduring capacity for adaptation and survival. As we imagine walking across this world, we can picture deserts stretching under a blazing sun, rivers carving deep channels through barren land, and volcanic peaks sending smoke into hazy skies. The air smells of sulfur and scorched earth. The oceans, once vibrant, are quiet. The reefs reduced to rubble. Yet, in hidden corners, shallow pools, underground burrows, isolated valleys, life persists. The contrast of devastation and resilience is striking, almost surreal, and yet it is the reality of the Great Dying. If we listen closely, we might hear the subtle sounds of this world, the distant rumble of eruptions, the whisper of wind across barren plains, the scratch of small creatures moving through underbrush. Silence dominates, yet life's persistence whispers beneath, a quiet hum of survival waiting to expand once again. And so, the Great Dying is not merely a story of destruction. It is a story of endurance, of adaptation, of of the fragile yet persistent thread that connects all life. It is a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, life finds ways to endure, to adapt, and to flourish. As our journey through this ancient world comes to a close for now, let us carry with us the memory of volcanic plains, barren deserts, oxygen-starved seas, and struggling forests. Let us remember the organisms that survived, the microorganisms that persisted in toxic waters, and the tiny seeds of recovery that would eventually give rise to entirely new forms of life. The Great Dying was a chapter of profound loss, yet it also set the stage for renewal, illustrating the enduring power of life on an ever-changing planet. And as you return to your own time and place, whether wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, or quietly pausing in a bustling day, remember this: the Earth's story is vast, intricate, and endlessly fascinating. Every layer of rock, every fossil, every shift of the continents is a page in a book that stretches far beyond human comprehension. And in our brief conscious moments, we are privileged to read, to imagine, and to wonder. Tonight, as your mind drifts with these ancient landscapes, may you feel the rhythm of deep time, the pulse of a planet that has endured beyond imagining, and the quiet, enduring promise that life, in all its forms, persists. As we step further into the world of the Great Dying, let us linger on the subtle details that often escape the imagination. The land itself was in constant flux. Massive volcanic eruptions in the Siberian traps released flows of lava and clouds of ash, altering the landscape as they moved. Mountains rose and eroded in rapid geological bursts, reshaping valleys and plains. Rivers carved new paths, swelling suddenly during storms and then drying into cracked beds during prolonged droughts. Salt flats expanded in arid regions, leaving the ground glimmering with crystalline layers. Life, when it survived, adapted to these rapidly changing terrains, moving cautiously through environments that were both beautiful and deadly. The forests of Pangaea, once lush and expansive, were fragmented and sparse. Gymnosperms, the earliest seed-bearing plants, struggled to recolonize scorched soils. Some species adapted to tolerate acidity in the soil and water caused by volcanic emissions. Others relied on small patches of fertile land, often located near streams or volcanic lakes, that provided slightly more hospitable conditions. Spores from ferns, mosses, and early seed plants drifted on the wind, settling where chance allowed. Each new sprout was a tiny triumph, a quiet act of persistence against the odds. Meanwhile, on the ground, small reptiles and amphibians navigated this harsh environment. Early archosaurs, forerunners of the mighty dinosaurs to come, were beginning to explore niches created by extinction. Their bodies were adapted to heat and scarcity, capable of traveling long distances to find food or shelter. Insects, small yet abundant, played a vital role in these ecosystems, pollinating plants and acting as both predator and prey. Even in moments of devastation, the intricate web of life persisted, delicate but unbroken. The oceans were equally dramatic, though in ways invisible to the naked eye. As temperatures rose, the solubility of oxygen in seawater decreased, leading to vast regions of anoxia. These oxygen-depleted zones could stretch across thousands of kilometers, turning once thriving ecosystems into barren deserts. Marine invertebrates, including brachiopods, trilobites, and mollusks, struggled or vanished. Cyanobacteria and other resilient microorganisms took advantage of the extreme conditions, sometimes forming dense mats on the seafloor, altering nutrient cycles in ways that would reverberate for millennia. Chemical changes in the ocean also contributed to the crisis. Sulfur-reducing bacteria released hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas that could diffuse into the atmosphere, further stressing terrestrial and marine life. Acidification of seawater dissolved calcium carbonate structures, making it nearly impossible for shelled organisms to maintain their protective exteriors. Coral reefs, which had been vibrant hubs of biodiversity, collapsed. The seas, once alive with colour and movement, became muted, ghostly realms of chemical imbalance and survival. Yet, even amid this turmoil, pockets of resilience existed. Certain microbes adapted to the low oxygen, high toxicity waters. Small, hardy invertebrates could survive in isolated microhabitats, clinging to life in crevices, sediments, and shallow lagoons. These survivors were the foundation for recovery, the living threads that would eventually reweave the tapestry of life across the oceans. On land, the climate was harsh and extreme. Deserts expanded, rivers dried into ephemeral streams, and rainfall became unpredictable. But the planet was not static. Volcanic activity, while destructive, also released nutrients into the soils, creating localized regions where plants could re-establish themselves. Insects, small amphibians, and reptiles used these patches to survive. The dynamic between destruction and creation was constant. Even as the Earth's surface burned and shifted, life persisted in ways both subtle and profound. Let us imagine, for a moment, the sensory world of this time. The air is warm and thick, carrying the scent of sulfur and scorched earth. Ash and dust from distant eruptions obscure the sun, casting an eerie glow across landscapes. Wind whistles through fractured valleys, carrying spores, seeds, and small insects to new locations. Rivers rush violently during sudden storms, only to retreat into mudflats during dry periods. Forests groan under stress, their leaves and branches blackened or scorched. Volcanoes loom in the distance, pillars of smoke and molten rock marking the restless heart of the planet. Even in such a world, subtle rhythms persist. Microorganisms cycle nutrients in the soil and water. Early plants photosynthesize in fragmented forests. Insects seek shelter and food, maintaining the faint pulse of ecosystems. Amphibians move cautiously, avoiding the harshest extremes. Reptiles explore the terrain, searching for sustenance. Every small action, every minute adaptation contributes to the survival of life as a whole. The Great Dying also reveals the intricate connection between land, sea, and atmosphere. Volcanic emissions altered not only the climate, but also the chemistry of the oceans. Rising temperatures caused ocean currents to slow, redistributing nutrients and oxygen unevenly. Carbon dioxide accumulation created greenhouse effects that further intensified heating. Methane release from permafrost and ocean sediments amplified the warming, creating feedback loops that were difficult for life to overcome. These interconnected processes demonstrate that the extinction event was not a simple catastrophe, but a complex, multi-layered environmental crisis. Marine ecosystems provide a window into this complexity. Fish, mollusks, and other organisms were forced to navigate increasingly inhospitable waters. Oxygen-starved zones expanded, creating regions where only the simplest forms of life could survive. Cyanobacteria and sulfur bacteria thrived, forming dense mats that altered nutrient cycles and chemical balances. Coral reefs, once bustling with life, crumbled, leaving behind ghostly skeletons of their former selves. Yet in isolated pockets, life endured. Small mollusks and hardy microorganisms persisted, setting the stage for the eventual recovery of marine ecosystems. On land, recovery was equally gradual. Plants that could tolerate acidity, drought, and heat began to recolonize areas where soil conditions were suitable. Gymnosperms, ferns, and mosses slowly spread, creating the first green patches in a scarred landscape. Insects returned to pollinate and feed on these plants, sustaining localized food webs. Small reptiles and amphibians explored and occupied niches left vacant by extinct species. Over millennia, these early pioneers would give rise to more complex ecosystems, eventually leading to the flourishing of Mesozoic life. The sensory world of the Great Dying is rich with detail. Imagine standing in a sparse forest, the air thick with ash and heat. The ground is cracked and dry, yet small green shoots push upward through the soil. Insects crawl across leaves, oblivious to the larger patterns of devastation unfolding around them. A distant volcano rumbles, sending smoke and lava into the sky. Rivers, swollen from sporadic rains, carve new channels across the land, reshaping habitats. And somewhere nearby, a small amphibian pauses, listening to the faint hum of life persisting against all odds. Even in the oceans, sensory detail can be imagined. Water is warm and murky, filled with chemical traces of volcanic activity. Microbes form dense mats on the seafloor, while small invertebrates navigate around these shifting habitats. Dead coral and shells litter the ocean floor, evidence of previous abundance. Occasionally, hardy fish swim through oxygenated pockets, searching for food and shelter. The interplay of destruction and survival creates a dynamic, ever-changing environment where life's persistence is both fragile and remarkable. One of the most striking lessons from the Great Dying is the resilience of life. Even under extreme stress, ecosystems adapt. Microorganisms survive in hostile conditions. Plants recolonize barren soil. Insects and small vertebrates exploit new niches. Over millions of years, these adaptations lead to renewed biodiversity, illustrating the slow but relentless capacity of life to recover and thrive. As we reflect on this, it becomes clear that the Great Dying is not merely a tale of loss. It is a testament to the interconnectedness of Earth's systems, how volcanic activity, climate change, ocean chemistry, and biological adaptation intertwine to create both crisis and opportunity. Life's story is one of continual adaptation, resilience, and renewal, and even in moments of profound devastation, the threads of survival remain unbroken. Tonight, as your mind wanders through these ancient landscapes, may you notice the details, the faint green shoots in barren forests, the survival of a tiny amphibian, the glimmer of life in a murky ocean. May you sense the rhythm of Earth's deep time, the pulse of a planet that has endured catastrophic change and emerged over millions of years into renewed abundance. The Great Dying is a story that stretches beyond the imagination. It is a chapter of Earth's history written in stone, ash, and living organisms, both lost and enduring. It reminds us of the fragility of ecosystems, the resilience of life, and the extraordinary forces that shape the planet. By contemplating this time, we connect not only with the past, but with the ongoing story of life on Earth, a narrative of persistence and transformation that continues today. And as we leave this part of our journey, let us carry with us the quiet wonder of survival against overwhelming odds. Let us remember the microbes, plants, insects, and small vertebrates that endured the Great Dying. Let us recognize the interplay of destruction and renewal that defines the history of our planet. And in this recognition, may we find both humility and awe, appreciating the vastness of time and the intricate, persistent power of life. As we continue our journey into the Great Dying, we arrive at the heart of the catastrophe, a time when the pace of change became almost unimaginable. The volcanic eruptions in Siberia, relentless and immense, had transformed the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide and methane built up, warming the planet in a feedback loop that only intensified the crisis. The greenhouse effect accelerated, pushing temperatures higher and higher. In some regions, the land became so hot that it resembled an oven. The ground cracked and dry, rivers evaporating before reaching the sea. The oceans, meanwhile, became a labyrinth of oxygen-depleted zones, their chemistry transformed in ways that few species could endure. Let us take a closer look at the seas during this period. Once teeming with life, these waters were now dominated by microorganisms capable of surviving extreme conditions. Cyanobacteria thrived in warm, murky waters, forming dense mats on the seafloor. Sulfur bacteria emitted hydrogen sulfide, creating a toxic environment that extended into the atmosphere. Larger marine animals struggled to survive, with many species succumbing to the combined effects of heat, acidification, and oxygen loss. Trilobites, once ubiquitous, had vanished completely. Corals that had built complex reef systems collapsed, leaving barren skeletons as silent monuments to the life that had been. Yet even in these hostile oceans, survival persisted in subtle, almost invisible ways. Some mollusks, crustaceans, and hardy fish adapted to the harsh conditions, clinging to life in isolated pockets where oxygen levels remained sufficient. Microbial communities cycled nutrients, sustaining the very smallest organisms and forming the foundation for the eventual recovery of ocean ecosystems. These survivors were tiny but significant, the living threads that would later weave the tapestry of new marine life. On land, the situation was equally dire. Deserts expanded across the supercontinent Pangaea, their vast arid expanses stretching from pole to pole. Storms were sudden and violent, eroding soil and reshaping landscapes. Forests, already fragmented, burned or suffocated under the combination of heat and volcanic ash. Gymnosperms, the primary seed-bearing plants, struggled to find patches of fertile soil. Spores from ferns and mosses drifted on the wind, attempting to colonize barren lands, while insects and small amphibians followed closely, seeking the sparse vegetation that remained. Life persisted, but only just. Among the land creatures, early reptiles and amphibians faced extraordinary challenges. These animals had to navigate a world of extremes, moving across scorching plains and avoiding both predators and environmental hazards. Some reptiles developed adaptations to conserve water and tolerate heat. Amphibians sought out temporary water sources, burrowing into mud to escape the heat. Small insects thrived in niches left vacant by the larger species, pollinating plants and maintaining the minimal functioning of ecosystems. Every movement, every small survival tactic mattered in a world teetering on the brink. The sensory experience of the great dying is striking. Imagine standing on a cracked, sun-scorched plain, Ash drifts through the air, mixing with the heat to create a thick haze. Volcanic peaks in the distance release clouds of smoke, glowing rivers of lava flowing slowly toward valleys below. The wind whistles across fractured terrain, carrying dust, spores, and tiny insects to new locations. Rivers flood briefly after sudden storms, only to dry again under relentless heat. Forests creak and groan under stress, their skeletal branches silhouetted against a sky heavy with haze. And somewhere nearby, a small amphibian pauses, sensing the subtle vibrations of the land, moving cautiously to survive another day. The extinction event was not a single instant, but a prolonged cascade of disasters unfolding over tens of thousands of years. Species did not vanish simultaneously. Some clung on longer, their populations dwindling gradually. Others disappeared suddenly as local conditions tipped past the threshold of survival. This staggered pattern of extinction created a world in constant flux, where survival depended on flexibility, adaptability, and often sheer luck. The interplay of land, sea, and atmosphere was central to this process. Volcanic activity released massive quantities of gases, altering climate and ocean chemistry simultaneously. Methane release from permafrost amplified warming, while acid rain reshaped terrestrial environments. Oxygen depletion in the oceans created chemical deserts, stressing marine life and triggering further feedback loops. These interconnected systems demonstrate that the Great Dying was not merely a local catastrophe, but a planetary scale crisis, reshaping life across every habitat. Amid this global upheaval, life found refuge in microhabitats, shallow lakes, underground burrows, sheltered valleys, and isolated coastal pools provided the last havens for survivors. Microbial communities thrived in these refuges, recycling nutrients and maintaining the faint pulse of life. Small invertebrates persisted, feeding on detritus and forming the foundation for future ecosystems. On land, hardy plants recolonized small patches of soil, while insects and amphibians explored new niches created by the shifting environment. Each surviving organism played a crucial role in the eventual recovery of life. The Great Dying also had profound effects on evolutionary trajectories. Species that survived were often those with adaptability, rapid reproductive cycles, and the ability to tolerate extreme conditions. These traits would shape the future course of evolution, giving rise to new forms of life that could exploit the niches left by extinct species. In this sense, the Great Dying was not just an ending, but a reset button, reshaping the ecological and evolutionary landscape for millions of years to come. We can also imagine the nights over Pangaea during this time. The sky, obscured by volcanic haze, glows faintly with reflected light from distant lava flows. Stars are dimmed, yet still visible, scattered through the murky atmosphere. The air is heavy, thick with particles and chemical traces of volcanic activity. Insects move silently across the land, amphibians burrow in the soil, and small reptiles traverse the barren terrain. Even in darkness, the quiet persistence of life continues. As the centuries and millennia unfold, recovery begins, though very slowly. In the oceans, small microbial communities expand into new niches. Mollusks and crustaceans begin recolonizing areas where oxygen levels permit. Early fish diversify cautiously, exploring habitats vacated by extinct species. On land, plants capable of tolerating extreme conditions spread gradually. Gymnosperms form small forests, ferns and mosses colonize damp areas, and insects exploit the vegetation, maintaining minimal ecological networks. Reptiles and amphibians navigate these evolving landscapes, slowly rebuilding terrestrial ecosystems. This slow recovery emphasizes the remarkable resilience of life. Though the Great Dying wiped out vast numbers of species, it did not extinguish life entirely. Microbial mats, hardy plants, and adaptable animals persisted, laying the groundwork for new ecosystems. Over millions of years, biodiversity rebounded. Marine ecosystems regained complexity, with corals and reef-building organisms returning. Terrestrial ecosystems flourished once again, providing habitats for the next wave of evolution, the rise of the dinosaurs, and the flourishing of the Mesozoic world. Let us pause to reflect on the lessons of this time. The Great Dying illustrates both the fragility and resilience of life. Ecosystems are interconnected, and shifts in one element can ripple across the entire planet. Yet life endures, even in the face of catastrophic change. The survivors of this event carried the legacy of persistence, adaptation, and renewal. From these small beginnings, new life forms would emerge, shaping the earth in ways both familiar and extraordinary. The story of the Great Dying is also a story of scale. While human history unfolds over millennia, this extinction event played out over tens of thousands of years. A blink in geological time, yet a vast transformative span for life on Earth. The events reshaped continents, altered climates, and reset the course of evolution, creating the stage for the world that would follow. As we imagine standing in this ancient world, notice the subtle signs of survival. A fern pushes through scorched soil. A small amphibian pauses in the mud, sensing movement. Microbial mats ripple in shallow waters. Insects traverse the fragmented forests. These quiet signs of persistence contrast with the vast destruction around them, reminding us that even in the darkest times, life endures. The Great Dying, in its magnitude and complexity, teaches us about the forces that shape our planet. Volcanic eruptions, climate change, ocean chemistry, and species interactions intertwine to create both crises and opportunities. Life is continually adapting, finding ways to persist even under the most extreme conditions. By understanding this deep past, we gain insight not only into the history of Earth, but also into the ongoing processes that sustain life today. And so, as we leave this portion of our journey, let us carry with us an appreciation for the persistence of life. Let us remember the organisms that survived, the microorganisms that thrived in harsh conditions, and the tiny seeds of recovery that eventually gave rise to entirely new ecosystems. The Great Dying was a story of both loss and hope, a testament to the enduring power of life on an ever-changing planet. As we move forward in time from the most catastrophic moments of the Great Dying, we begin to see signs of life slowly reclaiming the scarred Earth. The immediate aftermath was stark. Barren landscapes stretched across continents. Shallow seas remained murky and oxygen poor, and forests were sparse shadows of their former selves. Yet even amid this desolation, life found footholds. Small refuges where survival was possible and from which recovery would gradually unfold. The late recovery phase was neither rapid nor uniform. Different regions of Pangaea and its surrounding oceans healed at different rates. Some areas remained harsh deserts for tens of thousands of years, their soil still infused with the remnants of volcanic activity. Others, particularly along coasts, river valleys, and volcanic lakes, offered slightly more hospitable conditions. These became pockets of rebirth, where plants, microbes, insects, and early vertebrates began to reclaim the land. Life was patchy, fragmented, yet persistent. In the oceans, the recovery of marine ecosystems was gradual and astonishing. Small, hardy organisms, microbes, mollusks, and crustaceans continued to dominate shallow seas. They formed the foundation for new food webs, supporting early fish and other vertebrates that slowly diversified. Coral reefs began to reappear in isolated areas, although these were small and fragile compared to the thriving reefs of the Permian. Microbial mats remained widespread, maintaining nutrient cycles in the absence of larger species. Over millions of years, these simple beginnings would give rise to complex marine communities, teeming once more with life. Terrestrial ecosystems also began to re-establish themselves. Gymnosperms, the seed-bearing plants that had survived the extinction, expanded into vacant spaces, forming early forests. Ferns and mosses colonized moist areas, creating pockets of greenery in otherwise barren landscapes. Insects followed closely, pollinating plants and forming the early threads of terrestrial food webs. Early reptiles, emerging from the shadows of extinction, explored new niches, finding opportunities to thrive where larger predators had vanished. The climate during this late recovery phase was slowly stabilizing, although fluctuations were still common. The greenhouse effects caused by volcanic carbon dioxide and methane gradually diminished as gases were absorbed by oceans and trapped in sediments. Rainfall became more predictable, rivers stabilized, and soils slowly regained fertility. Yet the earth was still warm, often much warmer than present-day conditions, and deserts continued to dominate vast regions of the supercontinent. These extremes shaped the adaptations of surviving and emerging species, favoring those capable of enduring heat, scarcity, and rapid environmental change. Consider the sensory experience of this slowly recovering world. Imagine walking along a river valley, the air warm but breathable, carrying faint scents of plant life returning to the soil. Small ferns and gymnosperms push through nutrient-rich mud, their leaves reaching for sunlight. Insects buzz softly above the plants, pollinating and feeding. Amphibians move cautiously along the edges of shallow streams, while small reptiles traverse the surrounding plains, alert to predators and competitors. Overhead, volcanic peaks still smoke in the distance, reminders of the Earth's restless energy, but their eruptions are less frequent, allowing life to persist and expand. During this phase, evolutionary experimentation was particularly intense. The survivors of the Great Dying were often small, adaptable, and fast reproducing species. These traits allowed them to exploit new niches, giving rise to new forms of life. Early reptiles diversified, some developing specialized diets, while others explored semi-aquatic or arboreal habitats. Insects evolved novel forms and behaviors to take advantage of the spreading plant life. The ecological stage was being rebuilt piece by piece, with each surviving species contributing to the intricate web of recovery. The oceans, too, saw remarkable experimentation. Fish that survived the initial extinction events slowly expanded into new territories, adapting to changing oxygen levels and food availability. Early sharks and ray-finned fish explored new habitats, laying the foundation for the complex marine ecosystems of the Triassic. Mollusks and crustaceans diversified, some forming symbiotic relationships with early corals. Microbial communities continued to dominate in oxygen-poor areas, acting as both stabilizers and pioneers in the recovering seas. On land, the first true forests began to take shape. Gymnosperms formed dense stands, creating shaded undergrowth where ferns and mosses thrived. Insects played essential roles as pollinators, herbivores, and prey, linking the plant and animal worlds. Small reptiles and amphibians navigated these environments, hunting insects and seeking shelter among the vegetation. These emerging ecosystems were fragile yet dynamic, a delicate balance of survival and competition. The recovery of life during this time also illustrates the importance of adaptation to extreme conditions. Organisms that could tolerate heat, fluctuating water availability, and chemical changes in soil and water had a selective advantage. Some reptiles developed more efficient respiratory systems to cope with low oxygen or high carbon dioxide. Plants evolved strategies to conserve water and resist acidic soils. Microbes adapted to chemical extremes in both terrestrial and marine environments. Each adaptation was a small step toward rebuilding biodiversity and ecological complexity. As the millennia passed, new interactions emerged. Predation, competition, and symbiosis drove evolutionary innovation. Early reptiles developed new hunting strategies and body forms, while insects diversified to exploit a variety of plants. Microbes influenced nutrient cycles in soils and oceans, shaping the environments that supported larger organisms. Even small changes, a plant spreading slightly farther, an insect finding a new food source, had cascading effects across ecosystems, demonstrating the interconnectedness of all life. The late recovery phase of the Great Dying also set the stage for the Mesozoic era. By the time the ecosystems stabilized, roughly 10 million years after the extinction event, early reptiles were diversifying rapidly, laying the groundwork for the rise of dinosaurs. Marine ecosystems had regained complexity, with new fish species, corals, and invertebrates filling niches left vacant by extinct species. Forests and wetlands were spreading, providing habitats for both small and large terrestrial organisms. The Earth, once devastated, was entering a new age of evolutionary possibility. As we imagine walking through these early Triassic landscapes, notice the subtleties of life rebuilding itself. A fern unfurls in a shaded grove. A small reptile scuttles across a riverbank, pausing to catch the scent of prey. Insects hover above emerging flowers, pollinating and feeding. Streams ripple through recovering valleys, reflecting the glow of a sun filtered through thin clouds. Overhead, distant volcanoes remind us of Earth's ongoing activity, but the environment is now stable enough for life to flourish once more. The story of this recovery is one of patience and persistence. Life did not rush back. Ecosystems rebuilt slowly, generation by generation. Yet every surviving species, every microhabitat, and every adaptation contributed to the renewal of the planet. The Great Dying, though catastrophic, became a crucible for evolutionary innovation, shaping the future trajectory of life on Earth in ways both subtle and profound. Tonight, as we imagine this ancient world, let us remember the balance of devastation and renewal. The Great Dying wiped out vast numbers of species, but it also cleared the way for new life to emerge. The survivors of this event carried the legacy of resilience, adaptation, and persistence. From them, the Mesozoic era would eventually unfold, a time of giants, both in the oceans and on land, a world reshaped by the slow, inexorable processes of evolution and ecological recovery. And as your mind drifts through these landscapes of recovery, may you feel the quiet rhythm of life returning. The forests, the rivers, the oceans, the insects, the reptiles, they all contribute to the unfolding story of Earth, a story of endurance, transformation, and the extraordinary capacity of life to rebound after the most profound calamity. As the Earth gradually recovered from the Great Dying, the stage was set for an extraordinary chapter in the story of life. The oceans, once muted and ghostly, began to teem again with activity, though in forms markedly different from the Permian seas. Small, hardy fish and invertebrates, survivors of the extinction, had multiplied and diversified, slowly filling ecological niches left vacant by the vanished species. Coral reefs re-emerged in pockets, fragile but resilient, their early structures providing shelter for a variety of marine organisms. Microbial communities continue to play an essential role. Cyanobacteria and sulfur bacteria, which had dominated the seas during the most extreme conditions, now shared space with more complex life. Their mats helped recycle nutrients, supporting the growth of mollusks, crustaceans, and small fish. Predation began to shape behaviors and physical adaptations. Shells grew thicker, fins became more maneuverable, and early jaws evolved to capture fast-moving prey. These subtle evolutionary innovations were the quiet precursors to the more dramatic changes that would define the Triassic seas. On land, life was also stirring in new ways. Early archosaurs, the ancestors of dinosaurs, crocodiles, and birds, began to explore niches vacated by extinct Permian species. These reptiles were small at first, often only the size of a modern fox or lizard, but they were agile and adaptable, capable of hunting insects, small vertebrates, and opportunistic prey. Their skeletons were lightweight yet sturdy, allowing for increased mobility, a trait that would become central to their evolutionary success. The climate of the Triassic period was still warm, often hotter than anything we experience today. Deserts covered vast stretches of Pangaea, with occasional river valleys and oases providing crucial refuges for life. Rainfall was unpredictable, and storms could sweep across landscapes suddenly, reshaping the terrain and redistributing seeds, spores, and insects. Forests were patchy but growing, dominated by gymnosperms, ferns, and mosses. Insects thrived in these microclimates, pollinating plants, feeding on detritus, and serving as prey for small reptiles and amphibians. Predator-to-prey dynamics became increasingly complex. As small reptiles and amphibians diversified, they created new challenges for other organisms. Insects evolved defensive strategies, camouflage, rapid movement, and even chemical deterrents to survive. Plants adapted as well, growing tougher leaves, spines, or denser foliage to deter herbivory. Early archosaurs, meanwhile, honed their hunting skills using agility, speed, and coordination to catch prey. Each interaction, each small adaptation rippled through the ecosystem, shaping evolutionary trajectories in ways that would reverberate for millions of years. The sensory world of this recovering Earth is rich and varied. Imagine walking through a sparse forest along a river valley. The air is warm, filled with the scent of fresh vegetation and wet soil. Ferns and gymnosperms push upward through the ground, their leaves swaying in the occasional breeze. Insects buzz softly, pollinating flowers and exploring leaves. A small archosaur, alert and agile, darts across the undergrowth, pausing to survey its surroundings. Overhead, a distant volcano emits faint smoke, a reminder of the Earth's restless energy. Rivers shimmer in the sunlight, reflecting the slow but steady pulse of life returning to the land. Marine life, too, was transforming. Fish that survived the extinction event diversified into a variety of forms. Some became agile predators, hunting in shoals or ambushing prey near reefs and lagoons. Mollusks and crustaceans explored new habitats, taking advantage of both open waters and sheltered substrates. Early corals and sponges rebuilt the architecture of reefs, providing shelter and feeding opportunities for a growing array of marine animals. Microbial mats remain present in deeper or oxygen-poor areas, a quiet but essential part of the ecosystem, cycling nutrients and stabilizing the seabed. This period also marked the slow rise of new ecological strategies. Herbivory expanded as plants recolonized the land, and small reptiles began experimenting with different diets and behaviors. Predation pressures increased, driving adaptations in speed, camouflage, and sensory acuity. Plants evolved to resist herbivory, creating a subtle arms race that shaped the structure and diversity of ecosystems. Even microorganisms adapted to these changes, responding to shifts in soil composition, nutrient availability, and chemical balance. Life was not simply recovering, it was innovating, exploring the possibilities opened by the extinction event. The rise of early archosaurs is particularly significant. These creatures were small at first, but their agility, efficiency, and adaptability allowed them to exploit the recovering landscapes effectively. Some were carnivorous, preying on insects, amphibians, and smaller reptiles. Others experimented with omnivory or herbivory, feeding on plants and detritus. Their skeletons, built for speed and maneuverability, allowed them to explore varied environments, from riverbanks to forested patches and open plains. These early archosaurs set the stage for the future dominance of dinosaurs, mammals' distant cousins, and ultimately birds. Climatic stabilization during this period was gradual. Greenhouse gases released during the extinction event slowly diminished, absorbed by oceans and sediments. Rainfall became more predictable, supporting the expansion of forests and wetlands. Seasonal cycles emerged more clearly, influencing plant growth and reproductive timing, as well as the behavior and migration patterns of animals. Temperature fluctuations remained extreme in some regions, particularly deserts, but life adapted to these conditions through physiological and behavioral innovations. The oceans, as well as the land, were laboratories of evolutionary experimentation. Fish developed more efficient fins and jaws. Mollusks evolved defensive shells and burrowing behaviors. Crustaceans diversified in size, shape, and habitat preference. Microbes continued to cycle nutrients, maintaining the basic functions of ecosystems, while more complex organisms re-established dominance. Predator-prey interactions drove evolutionary pressures, shaping both physical form and behavior across species. The late Triassic landscape is one of contrasts and textures. Picture an open plain dotted with patches of gymnosperm trees and ferns. Insects buzz above the undergrowth, pollinating flowers and feeding on leaves. Small archosaurs dart between trees, stalking prey or evading competitors. Rivers cut through the plains, carrying sediments that nourish downstream forests. In the distance, volcanic peaks remain active, their smoke and ash reminders of Earth's continuing restlessness. Across deserts and wetlands, life experiments with survival, adaptation, and opportunity. Even in these early stages, the interplay of life and environment is evident. Reptiles, amphibians, and insects respond to climate, vegetation, and predation pressures. Plants adapt to herbivory, soil composition, and water availability. Microbes influence nutrient cycles and chemical balances. Oceans, rivers, and lakes shape the habitats of aquatic and semi-aquatic organisms. Every small change contributes to the evolving tapestry of life, a slow and intricate dance between species and environment. As we leave this phase of recovery, the Earth is no longer a barren, devastated planet. It is a world of subtle richness, where life experiments and diversifies, laying the foundations for the Mesozoic era. Early archosaurs, recovering ecosystems, and the re-emerging seas all hint at the dramatic transformations to come. The survivors of the Great Dying have not only endured, they are shaping a future that will eventually see the rise of dinosaurs, new marine ecosystems, and landscapes teeming with life once again. Tonight, as you imagine these early Triassic worlds, may you feel the pulse of life returning, the quiet rhythm of ecosystems rebuilding. From the smallest microbes to the first agile archosaurs, every organism contributes to the unfolding story of Earth. The Great Dying may have marked the end of one chapter, but it also set the stage for a new beginning, a story of adaptation, innovation, and the remarkable resilience of life across an ever-changing planet. As the Triassic period advanced, life was gradually reclaiming its lost diversity. Early archosaurs, small and nimble at first, began to increase in size. Some evolved longer limbs and more robust frames, capable of traversing the varied landscapes of recovering Pangaea. These proto-dinosaurs were among the earliest forms to occupy the top tiers of terrestrial food webs. They were hunters, scavengers, and opportunists, exploring niches left empty by the extinction of Permian giants. Their emergence marks the quiet beginnings of a new era, one that would eventually be dominated by dinosaurs. The landscapes themselves were dynamic, shaped by both climate and tectonics. Pangaea stretched as a single supercontinent, but its interior regions were arid and extreme, while coastal areas benefited from rivers, lakes, and seasonal rainfall. Floodplains supported pockets of vegetation, allowing insects, amphibians, and reptiles to thrive. Mountains eroded slowly, feeding sediment into rivers that carried nutrients to the coasts. Volcanoes remained active in some regions, their eruptions transforming soils and reshaping habitats. This constant interplay of geologic and climatic forces provided a complex mosaic of environments for life to exploit. In the oceans, recovery continued in parallel. Coral reefs slowly re-established, providing shelter for mollusks, crustaceans, and early fish. Predation pressures encouraged adaptations such as stronger shells, sharper jaws, and more agile swimming. Some marine species experimented with novel feeding strategies, including filter feeding and ambush predation. Microbial mats, once dominant in oxygen-poor zones, retreated to extreme niches but continued to play a vital role in nutrient cycling. The seas were becoming vibrant again, a mirror of terrestrial ecosystems in their gradual return to complexity. The climate during this period remained warm, often significantly hotter than today, yet with emerging patterns of seasonal change. Wet and dry cycles influenced plant growth and reproduction, while temperature extremes shaped behavior and physiology in animals. Reptiles developed ways to cope with heat, including burrowing, nocturnal activity, and efficient water conservation. Amphibians retreated to humid microhabitats, relying on streams and lakes to survive. Insects, ever adaptable, diversified in tandem with the spread of vegetation. Life was finding strategies to persist in a world still marked by the legacy of extinction. Predator-prey dynamics intensified as ecosystems regained complexity. Small herbivorous reptiles and early proto-dinosaurs fed on ferns, gymnosperms, and other recovering plants, while predators adapted to hunt efficiently. Camouflage, speed, and behavioral strategies became critical for survival. Even seemingly minor adaptations had cascading effects throughout ecosystems. Insects evolved to exploit new plants and avoid predation, while plants develop defenses such as tougher leaves or chemical deterrents. The intricate web of life was being rewoven thread by thread. Imagine standing on a recovering floodplain during this era. The sun is warm, but filtered through occasional clouds and volcanic haze. Gymnosperms tower in patches, their needles swaying gently in the breeze. Ferns and mosses carpet the ground in green, soft and lush where soil allows. Insects hum faintly, visiting flowers and feeding on leaves. Small reptiles dart across the undergrowth, pausing to catch the scent of prey. In the distance, a proto-dinosaur moves with careful grace, its long limbs carrying it across the terrain as it hunts or searches for shelter. Rivers wind through valleys, reflecting the light of the sun, while distant volcanoes mark the restless heart of the earth. Marine environments also provide a rich sensory tableau. Shallow reefs shimmer with small fish weaving between corals, mollusks clinging to rocks, and crustaceans navigating crevices. Microbial mats ripple across oxygen-poor zones, invisible to most, yet fundamental to the ecosystem. Predatory fish patrol open waters, while filter feeders drift gracefully in search of plankton. Even in these early stages of recovery, the oceans exhibit the rhythms and interactions that will shape marine life for millions of years to come. The rise of larger reptiles and early proto-dinosaurs set the stage for significant ecological transformations. As these animals explored new niches, they exerted pressures on both prey and competitors. Herbivorous species learned to exploit sparse vegetation efficiently, while predators adapted to chase, ambush, or scavenge effectively. These interactions fueled evolutionary innovation, driving the development of traits that would define the dinosaurs of the Jurassic period. Even in the shadow of past extinction, life was experimenting boldly, shaping the ecosystems of the future. The interconnections between climate, geology, and biology became increasingly apparent. Volcanic soils provided nutrients that supported plant growth. Rivers distributed those nutrients across valleys, and the resulting vegetation sustained herbivores and predators. Seasonal changes influenced reproductive cycles and migrations. Ocean currents carried heat and nutrients across vast distances, shaping marine productivity. Life, in every form, was intimately tied to these planetary processes, responding and adapting to the rhythms of the Earth itself. As the Triassic progressed, ecosystems became more complex. Floodplains, forests, and deserts, each hosted a variety of species, linked through predator-prey dynamics, competition, and symbiosis. Marine ecosystems expanded, with reefs, lagoons, and shallow seas providing habitats for diverse communities. Even the smallest organisms, microbes, insects, and tiny crustaceans, played critical roles influencing nutrient cycling, soil composition, and food web structure. Each species, no matter how small, contributed to the overall resilience and stability of the recovering Earth. In imagining this world, consider the contrast between extremes. Deserts stretch vast and dry, marked by heat and wind, yet small oases support pockets of life. Floodplains are lush, their rivers nourishing plants and attracting animals. Shallow seas shimmer with life, while oxygen-poor zones harbour resilient microbes. Volcanoes continue to shape the landscape, reminding all inhabitants of the planet's restless energy. Life adapts, survives, and flourishes in this complex mosaic, demonstrating the persistent rhythm of evolution. The late Triassic is also a time of innovation. Early archosaurs evolved specialized limbs for running, climbing, or swimming. Reptiles experiment with diverse diets, from carnivory to omnivory. Insects diversify in form and behavior to exploit new plants. Microbes adjust to chemical changes in soils and oceans. These evolutionary experiments, often subtle and gradual, are the precursors to the dramatic biodiversity that will characterize the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. As we pause to reflect on this phase of Earth's history, we see the interplay of destruction and renewal, adaptation and opportunity. The Great Dying set the stage, clearing ecosystems and challenging life to persist. In the aftermath, survival, flexibility, and innovation guided the recovery. The rise of proto-dinosaurs, the expansion of forests, and the recovery of marine life all point to a planet entering a new chapter, a world preparing for the extraordinary diversity and dominance of life that will unfold in the Mesozoic era. Tonight, as your mind wanders across these landscapes of recovery and innovation, may you sense the quiet rhythms of early Triassic life. From the smallest microbes in the oceans to the nimble proto-dinosaurs exploring river valleys, every organism contributes to the unfolding story of Earth. The planet, once devastated, now pulses with the persistence and ingenuity of life, hinting at the incredible transformations yet to come. As the Triassic period drew to a close, the Earth was a world in transformation. Life, which had clawed its way back from near annihilation, was now experimenting in bold new ways. The small, agile proto-dinosaurs and early archosaurs that had emerged during the recovery phase were beginning to diversify, laying the foundation for the extraordinary proliferation of dinosaurs in the Jurassic period. Each species explored niches left vacant by the extinction, adapting to the challenges and opportunities presented by a warm, dynamic planet. The landscapes of late Triassic Pangaea were dramatic and varied. Vast deserts still stretched across the supercontinent, punctuated by oases and river valleys that supported the fragile threads of life. Forests of gymnosperms, ferns, and mosses had expanded, forming corridors where insects and small reptiles flourished. Rivers meandered through floodplains, nourishing soils and creating fertile patches of vegetation. Mountains and volcanic regions continued to shape the terrain, while episodic storms redistributed nutrients and seeds, reshaping ecosystems over time. Life adapted to these fluctuating conditions with remarkable ingenuity. In these recovering forests and floodplains, early dinosaurs began to make their mark. Some were small, bipedal hunters, agile and alert, stalking insects and small vertebrates. Others experimented with herbivory, grazing on ferns and gymnosperms, their teeth and jaws evolving to process tough plant material efficiently. The diversity of early dinosaurs reflected the experimental nature of evolution following the Great Dying, as species explored every niche available to them. Predation, competition, and resource availability drove evolutionary innovation, shaping the body forms, behaviors, and strategies of these creatures in subtle but significant ways. Marine ecosystems were evolving alongside terrestrial ones. Coral reefs, once devastated, had expanded in shallow seas, providing shelter for mollusks, crustaceans, and early fish. Predatory fish developed stronger jaws and more maneuverable fins, while filter-feeding species explored new ways to harvest plankton. Microbial mats persisted in oxygen-poor zones, continuing to stabilize sediments and cycle nutrients. Predation pressures and competition encouraged specialization and diversity, slowly restoring complexity to the oceans. The climate of late Triassic Pangaea was warm and, in many regions, extreme. Deserts could scorch the land under intense sunlight, while river valleys and coastal regions offered more temperate microclimates. Rainfall was seasonal and unpredictable, creating challenges for plants and animals alike. Early dinosaurs and other reptiles developed adaptations to cope with these conditions, burrowing to escape heat, nocturnal activity to avoid daytime extremes, and physiological changes that improved water conservation. Life thrived in microhabitats where conditions were favorable, demonstrating the remarkable adaptability of species across the recovering planet. Predator-prey dynamics during this period were complex and influential. Small herbivorous dinosaurs and reptiles foraged cautiously among ferns and gymnosperms, wary of agile predators, hunting with speed and precision. Insects evolved to exploit new plants while avoiding predation through camouflage, rapid movement, and defensive mechanisms. Plants themselves developed tougher leaves, chemical deterrents, and growth strategies to resist herbivory. Every interaction, every subtle adaptation contributed to the intricate web of life being rebuilt across terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. The sensory world of late Triassic Earth is striking to imagine. Picture walking along a riverbank, the warm air thick with the scent of recovering forests and wet soil. Ferns and gymnosperms reach skyward, their leaves rustling softly in a gentle breeze. Insects buzz and flit among flowers and foliage, pollinating and feeding. Small herbivorous dinosaurs nibble on leaves, pausing to watch for predators. Predators move stealthily through the undergrowth, agile and alert, their eyes scanning for movement. Rivers glisten in the sunlight, reflecting the sky above, while distant volcanoes occasionally spew ash, shaping soils and habitats. The world is alive, intricate, and constantly adapting. Marine environments mirrored this diversity and activity. Shallow seas shimmer with fish darting between reefs, mollusks clinging to rocks, and crustaceans navigating crevices. Microbial mats stabilize oxygen pore zones, providing a foundation for life to persist even under challenging conditions. Predatory interactions drive evolutionary innovation. Jaws grow stronger, fins become more agile, and behaviors evolve to maximize survival. Slowly, complexity returns to marine ecosystems, foreshadowing the rich biodiversity of the Jurassic oceans. As early dinosaurs diversified, they began to explore new ecological roles. Some developed elongated limbs for rapid pursuit. Others developed specialized teeth for processing vegetation. The interplay of herbivores and predators created an evolutionary arms race, pushing species toward greater efficiency, speed, and adaptability. Insects and small vertebrates continue to exploit available resources, creating dynamic food webs that linked terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems in subtle and intricate ways. The late Triassic period also witnessed climate shifts that influenced the trajectory of life. While overall conditions remained warm, regional variations created opportunities for species to specialize. Deserts expanded in some areas, favoring reptiles adapted to heat and aridity. Coastal plains and river valleys offered milder climates, supporting forests, amphibians, and insects. Volcanic activity contributed nutrients to soils and oceans, driving productivity in both marine and terrestrial ecosystems. Life adapted to these spatial and temporal variations, demonstrating resilience and ingenuity in the face of environmental pressures. Consider the rivers, floodplains, and coastal regions where life thrived. Water levels fluctuate with seasonal rains, depositing nutrient-rich silt and supporting vegetation growth. Insects pollinate plants, herbivores browse cautiously, and predators patrol silently. Microbial communities cycle nutrients in soils and shallow waters, sustaining the productivity of these recovering ecosystems. Each organism, from the smallest microbe to the largest predator, contributes to the balance and complexity of the environment. The interplay between terrestrial and marine ecosystems is particularly striking. Rivers transport nutrients from land to sea, supporting marine life. Coastal plants stabilize sediments, creating habitats for small animals and insects. Insects that feed on coastal vegetation become prey for reptiles and amphibians. Predatory fish hunt near river mouths, while herbivorous species exploit algae and plant material washed into the seas. These interactions illustrate the intricate connectivity of ecosystems and the delicate balance required for biodiversity to flourish. By the end of the Triassic, early dinosaurs had established themselves as a significant presence in terrestrial ecosystems. Their increasing diversity and adaptability foreshadowed the dominance they would achieve in the Jurassic. Marine ecosystems were regaining richness and complexity, while terrestrial ecosystems continued to expand and diversify. The Earth, once devastated by the Great Dying, had entered a new era of evolutionary innovation, a world poised for the dramatic rise of the dinosaurs and the flourishing of life across land and sea. Tonight, as your imagination drifts across these late Triassic landscapes, picture the subtle rhythms of life, the buzzing of insects, the rustle of ferns, the cautious movements of herbivorous dinosaurs, and the stealth of predators. All form a living mosaic of persistence, adaptation, and renewal. Life, having endured the greatest extinction in Earth's history, is now experimenting, diversifying, and preparing for the next grand chapter of evolution. As the Triassic period gave way to the Jurassic, Earth entered a time of profound transformation. Life, which had clawed its way back from near annihilation during the Great Dying, was now asserting itself in bold, unprecedented ways. Early dinosaurs, small and experimental at first, had diversified into a variety of forms. Some remained agile, bipedal hunters, darting through forests and floodplains. Others had begun exploring herbivory, feeding on the steadily expanding forests of ferns, gymnosperms, and mosses. The stage was set for a dramatic reshaping of terrestrial ecosystems. The Triassic-Jurassic transition itself was marked by subtle yet significant environmental shifts. Volcanic activity, which had shaped landscapes throughout the Triassic, continued to influence climate and soil fertility. Rainfall patterns began to stabilize, supporting the growth of forests and the expansion of wetlands. Seasonal changes became more pronounced, guiding reproductive cycles, migrations, and behaviors in both plants and animals. Even in deserts, life persisted in small oases, as adaptive species exploited the niches available to them. Forests expanded considerably during this transition. Gymnosperms, dominant for millions of years, spread across valleys and riverbanks, creating dense groves where insects, small reptiles, and early herbivorous dinosaurs could thrive. Ferns and mosses carpeted the ground, adding texture and moisture retention to soils. These plant communities provided shelter and food for a growing array of species, establishing intricate ecological networks that connected flora and fauna in subtle, interdependent ways. Early dinosaurs were becoming increasingly dominant in terrestrial ecosystems. Predatory groups evolved greater agility, stronger jaws, and sharper claws, while herbivorous species diversified in size and strategy to exploit vegetation efficiently. The evolutionary arms race between predator and prey drove innovation, refining the behaviors, body structures, and survival strategies of these early reptiles. Even minor changes, a longer limb, a more precise bite, a better sense of smell, had ripple effects across ecosystems, shaping the balance of life on land. Marine ecosystems matured alongside terrestrial ones. Coral reefs, now more established and complex, supported diverse communities of mollusks, crustaceans, and fish. Predatory fish became increasingly specialized, hunting efficiently in coordinated shoals or ambushing prey among reefs. Filter-feeding species thrived, consuming plankton and contributing to nutrient cycling. Microbial mats persisted in less hospitable zones, quietly stabilizing sediments and supporting productivity. The oceans, like the land, were entering a period of relative stability, allowing ecosystems to flourish. Climate stabilization during the Triassic-Jurassic transition played a crucial role in shaping life. The planet remained warmer than today, yet seasonal fluctuations became more predictable. Rainfall nourished rivers, floodplains, and wetlands, supporting plant growth and sustaining herbivores. Deserts persisted, but organisms adapted to extremes through behavioral strategies such as burrowing, nocturnal activity, and efficient water conservation. Life thrived where conditions allowed, demonstrating resilience and ingenuity in the face of ongoing challenges. Predator-prey interactions continued to drive evolutionary innovation. Herbivorous dinosaurs developed specialized teeth and digestive systems to process tough vegetation efficiently, while predators honed speed, coordination, and hunting strategies. Insects diversified alongside plants, pollinating flowers, feeding on leaves, and avoiding predation through camouflage or chemical defenses. Plants responded in kind, developing tougher leaves, spines, and other strategies to deter herbivory. Every adaptation, every subtle change contributed to the richness and complexity of the emerging Jurassic ecosystems. Imagine walking through a late Triassic forest transitioning into the early Jurassic. The air is warm, filled with the scent of wet soil and growing vegetation. Ferns and mosses form soft carpets on the forest floor, while gymnosperms stretch toward the sky, their needles filtering sunlight. Insects flit among leaves and flowers, pollinating and feeding. Small herbivorous dinosaurs nibble on ferns and low branches, pausing to scan for predators. Agile carnivorous species move silently, their claws and jaws poised for action. Rivers glisten in the sunlight, reflecting the slowly stabilizing sky, while distant volcanoes remind us of the Earth's restless energy. In the oceans, life mirrors this terrestrial diversity. Shallow reefs shimmer with fish weaving between corals, mollusks clinging to rocks, and crustaceans navigating crevices. Predatory fish hunt with precision, while filter feeders drift in search of plankton. Microbial mats stabilize sediments in oxygen-poor zones, quietly supporting productivity. The oceans are once again dynamic ecosystems, shaped by predation, competition, and symbiosis, reflecting the subtle rhythms of the recovering planet. The rise of dominant dinosaur groups is particularly striking. Theropods, agile and often carnivorous, explored diverse habitats and hunting strategies. Early sauropodomorphs, long-necked herbivores, began exploiting high vegetation, while smaller, herbivorous groups grazed on ferns and low plants. The expansion of forests provided opportunities for these species to experiment with new behaviors and diets. Predator-prey dynamics intensified, driving further innovation and diversity. The interplay between terrestrial and marine ecosystems became increasingly evident. Rivers transported nutrients from land to sea, supporting coastal and marine productivity. Insects and small vertebrates provided food for both land and water predators. Plants stabilized soils and sediments, shaping habitats for amphibians and reptiles. Even the smallest organisms, microbes, plankton, and invertebrates, played essential roles, linking ecosystems through nutrient cycling and energy flow. Life was intricately connected across the planet, each species influencing the broader ecological web. By the early Jurassic, the Earth had transformed from the devastated world of the Great Dying into a dynamic, thriving planet. Dinosaurs were beginning their rise to dominance. Marine ecosystems were rich and complex, and forests and wetlands provided a mosaic of habitats for countless species. Life had not only recovered, it had innovated, diversified, and adapted, setting the stage for the remarkable biodiversity that would define the Mesozoic era. Tonight, as your mind drifts across these late Triassic and early Jurassic landscapes, imagine the subtle rhythms of life. Insects hum softly among ferns and mosses. Herbivorous dinosaurs graze cautiously. Agile predators stalk their prey, and fish navigate the vibrant reefs of recovering seas. Life, having endured the greatest extinction in Earth's history, now thrives in a complex, interconnected world, a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the inexorable march of evolution. By the early Jurassic, life had fully embraced the opportunity offered by a recovering world. The Great Dying was no longer a shadow over the planet. It had become a turning point, a reset button that allowed evolution to explore new possibilities. Dinosaurs, once small and tentative, were now diversifying into an array of forms, sizes, and ecological roles. From the agile predators that patrolled river valleys to the long-necked herbivores reaching high into the canopies, These creatures were shaping the face of terrestrial ecosystems as never before. Forests had expanded dramatically. Gymnosperms dominated upland areas, their needles swaying gently in the warm, often humid air. Ferns and cycads carpeted lowlands and floodplains, providing both sustenance and shelter for an array of animals. Mosses and small flowering plants formed dense undergrowth in places where moisture collected. Insects buzzed and crawled, pollinating plants, feeding on leaves, and serving as prey for larger animals. Birds were still millions of years away, but the buzzing, chirping, and rustling of life filled the forests with quiet, persistent energy. Herbivorous dinosaurs were now exploring ecological roles that would define their lineages for millions of years. Early sauropodomorphs stretched their long necks into the forest canopy, feeding on gymnosperms, cycads, and the occasional fern. Smaller ornithischians grazed closer to the ground, nibbling leaves and shoots with increasing efficiency. The interplay between herbivore and plant drove subtle evolutionary innovations. Tougher leaves prompted stronger jaws, more precise chewing, and digestive adaptations that allowed these creatures to extract more nutrition from fibrous vegetation. In turn, plants evolved defenses, spines, chemical deterrents, and changes in growth patterns to resist herbivory. The dance of life between predator, prey, and plant was intricate and ongoing. Predatory dinosaurs were equally diverse. Early theropods patrolled river valleys, plains, and forest edges, hunting with agility and precision. Their keen senses, sharp teeth, and swift limbs made them effective hunters, while their interactions with prey drove continuous adaptation in both predators and herbivores. Small carnivores darted through undergrowth, preying on insects, amphibians, and smaller reptiles. Medium-sized predators hunted in packs or ambushed herbivores, shaping the behavior and evolution of their prey. Every predator-to-prey interaction contributed to the dynamic equilibrium of Jurassic ecosystems. Rivers and wetlands were hubs of activity. Aquatic and semi-aquatic reptiles explored the waters, from small amphibious hunters to larger, more specialized predators. Fish swam through rivers and shallow seas, hunting in schools or hiding among reeds and submerged plants. Mollusks and crustaceans grazed on algae and detritus, while early corals and sponges provided shelter in the shallows. Microbial mats continued their quiet but essential work, cycling nutrients and stabilizing sediments. The interplay between water and land created an intricate web, connecting terrestrial and aquatic life in subtle, interdependent ways. The climate of the early Jurassic was generally warm, with higher levels of greenhouse gases than today, yet more stable than the extreme fluctuations of the late Triassic. Rainfall nourished forests and wetlands, sustaining herbivores and insects alike. Deserts persisted in interior regions, But oases and river valleys offered life-sustaining refuge. Seasonal variations guided migrations, reproduction, and feeding patterns, creating predictable rhythms that shape the behavior and survival strategies of animals. Insects were thriving and diversifying alongside plants and vertebrates. They pollinated flowers, fed on leaves, and served as prey for birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Their behaviors shaped plant evolution, while plant diversity offered new niches for insects to exploit. This ongoing interplay created increasingly complex ecosystems, where even the smallest organisms influence the survival and success of larger species. Insects were thriving and diversifying alongside plants and vertebrates. They pollinated flowers, fed on leaves, and served as prey for birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Their behaviors shaped plant evolution, while plant diversity offered new niches for insects to exploit. This ongoing interplay created increasingly complex ecosystems, where even the smallest organisms influenced the survival and success of larger species. Imagine a forest along a slow-moving river in the early Jurassic. Sunlight filters through a canopy of gymnosperms, casting dappled shadows on ferns and mosses below. Insects flit through the undergrowth, pollinating cycads and feeding on leaves. Small herbivorous dinosaurs nibble cautiously, ears and eyes alert to movement. Agile predators patrol the forest floor and riverbanks, while larger herbivores stretch their necks high to reach leaves beyond the reach of smaller competitors. Rivers reflect the shimmering sky, carrying nutrients downstream and supporting fish, crustaceans, and mollusks in the waters. Life is interconnected, resilient, and thriving. Marine life mirrored this complexity. Reefs flourished in shallow seas, populated by fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and corals. Predatory fish hunted with precision, filter feeders drifted in currents, and microbial mats stabilized oxygen pore zones. The oceans were dynamic, their productivity influenced by both local conditions and distant nutrient flows from rivers and erosion. Interactions between species created a delicate balance, shaping evolutionary pressures in subtle ways. The expansion of forests, wetlands, and shallow seas also facilitated the evolution of early bird lineage dinosaurs and their relatives, though they remained as small and inconspicuous. Climbing, gliding, and eventually powered flight would evolve much later. But these early experiments in mobility, balance, and predation set the stage for the incredible diversity of avian life to come. Climatic stability encouraged specialization. Herbivores diversified in diet, predators refined hunting strategies, and insects explored a wide range of ecological roles. Plants evolved in response to herbivory, developing defenses and new forms. Aquatic ecosystems stabilized, supporting complex food webs. Even microbial communities became more specialized, cycling nutrients in increasingly efficient ways. Life was no longer merely recovering. It was innovating, experimenting, and establishing long-term ecological structures. By the mid-Jurassic, the Earth had entered a period of remarkable biodiversity. Dinosaurs dominated the land, fish and invertebrates filled the seas, and insects and plants created intricate ecological networks. Life had transformed from the fragile post-extinction recovery into thriving, resilient, and dynamic ecosystems. The rhythms of survival, adaptation, and innovation now pulse through the planet, shaping the course of evolution for millions of years to come. Tonight, as your imagination drifts through these Jurassic landscapes, picture the subtleties of life, the rustling of ferns, the hum of insects, the careful steps of herbivorous dinosaurs, the silent stalking of predators, and the glimmering activity beneath river and ocean surfaces. Life, having endured the greatest extinction in Earth's history, now thrives across continents and seas, a testament to the resilience, creativity, and enduring spirit of evolution. By the time the late Cretaceous dawned, Earth had become a planet bursting with life. Forests were thick with conifers, cycads, and the newest arrivals, flowering plants or angiosperms. These blooms painted the world in fresh colours and scents, attracting pollinators and reshaping ecosystems. Bees, butterflies, beetles, and flies became constant companions to petals and pollen, weaving a new intimacy between plants and animals. Dinosaurs adapted to this botanical revolution. Towering sauropods reached the treetops, hadrosaurs grazed low, and armoured ankylosaurs shuffled slowly across plains, defended by spikes and clubs. Ceratopsians grew ornate horns and frills, not just for defense, but perhaps for communication and display. The air itself carried the songs of early birds, whose ancestors had already learned the freedom of flight. Mammals remained small, but resourceful, often nocturnal, scurrying through undergrowth and surviving on insects, seeds, and tiny prey. The land was a tapestry of ecosystems. River valleys filled with hadrosaur herds, floodplains echoing with predator calls, deserts where hardy angiosperms bloomed briefly after rains, and forests where shadows hid both hunters and hunted. Everywhere, the drama of life was ongoing. Adaptation, predation, reproduction, and survival. Beneath the waves, life was no less abundant. Coral reefs built thriving, three-dimensional worlds where mollusks, crustaceans, and fish darted among branching corals. Schools of shimmering teleost fish moved like living clouds, while ammonites with their spiraled shells drifted in the currents, both predators and prey. The seas were ruled by giants. Mosasaurs prowled the depths like marine dragons, sleek and muscular, jaws armed with conical teeth. Plesiosaurs glided gracefully, long necks weaving through the water as they hunted fish. Sharks circled in schools, opportunistic and ever patient. These oceans were alive with sound, movement, and danger. Nutrients carried from rivers enriched coastal waters, tying land and sea together in subtle cycles. Microbes, phytoplankton, and zooplankton, often invisible to the eye, form the base of marine food webs, capturing sunlight and feeding the entire system, from the smallest plankton to the largest mosasaur. Every being was part of a vast, interdependent web. For millions of years, the late Cretaceous world seemed like a pinnacle of evolutionary success. Dinosaurs flourished in numbers and diversity, plants spread into every niche, and oceans teemed with predators and prey. Yet all was not perfectly stable. Volcanoes erupted in different parts of the globe, releasing ash and gases that sometimes dimmed skies or shifted climates. Sea levels rose and fell, changing coastlines. Certain groups of animals, such as the once mighty ichthyosaurs, were already declining. These shifts were part of Earth's eternal rhythm: change, adaptation, renewal. But then, something happened that no species could truly prepare for. 66 million years ago, a mountain-sized asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula in what is now Mexico. In a single instant, the energy released was greater than billions of nuclear bombs. A crater, more than 100 kilometers wide, was blasted into the crust. Shockwaves circled the planet. Tsunamis crashed onto coasts, and forests thousands of kilometers away ignited from falling debris. For days and weeks, Earth was cloaked in darkness. Dust and soot filled the sky, blocking sunlight. Temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis faltered. Plants withered. Food chains collapsed, both on land and in the oceans. The once thriving late Cretaceous ecosystems unraveled. The mighty dinosaurs, rulers of the land for over 160 million years, were wiped away. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ammonites vanished from the oceans. Coral reefs withered. Entire forests died, leaving barren landscapes. It was a mass extinction, swift, brutal, and global. And yet, not all was lost. Some species endured, clinging to existence in hidden corners. Small mammals survived in burrows and forests, feeding on seeds, insects, and whatever food remained. Birds, descendants of small feathered dinosaurs, found refuge in the skies and forests, continuing the legacy of their vanished cousins. Crocodiles endured in rivers and swamps, their adaptability unmatched. In the oceans, certain fish, sharks, and plankton survived in deeper or sheltered waters. These survivors became the foundation of recovery, waiting for the earth to calm and the skies to clear. When sunlight returned and climate stabilized, the earth looked scarred but alive. Ferns were often the first pioneers, spreading quickly across ash-covered soil. Then shrubs, Flowering plants and trees began to regrow. Insects returned to pollinate. Birds filled the skies with new songs. Mammals, no longer confined to the shadows of dinosaurs, began to diversify into new forms. This was the dawn of a new era, the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. From tiny survivors came elephants, whales, primates, and eventually us. The asteroid had ended one dynasty, but it had also cleared the way for another. The story from the flourishing of the late Cretaceous to the devastation of the KPG extinction is a reminder of Earth's fragility and resilience. Life can build dazzlingly complex ecosystems over millions of years, only for them to be undone in moments. Yet from every catastrophe, renewal follows. Evolution continues, creativity returns, and ecosystems reshape themselves in surprising ways. As you drift into rest tonight, imagine the forests of the Cretaceous, filled with towering dinosaurs and blooming flowers, the oceans alive with ammonites and mosasaurs. Then picture the silence after the impact, the darkness, and the slow but steady return of green shoots, birdsong, and scurrying mammals. It is a cycle of loss and renewal that has played out again and again across Earth's history. Life, though fragile, is also enduring. It adapts, it evolves, it survives, and in its resilience, we find the deepest comfort of all, that even in the face of catastrophe, the story continues. And so, from the rise of life to its greatest trials, we've journeyed together through one of Earth's most extraordinary stories. The great dying reminds us of both the fragility and resilience of our planet and the life it carries. As you rest now, let your mind drift like the ancient seas, carried gently into dreams. Thank you for joining me tonight, and until next time, sleep well and dream of Earth.